Winter changes everything for people living on the street. When temperatures drop below freezing, homelessness stops being a housing problem. It becomes a survival problem. Each night requires knowledge, strategy, constant vigilance. The housed world sleeps through winter nights in 7 or 8 hour blocks. Warm, still, uninterrupted. For someone on the street, sleep becomes something else entirely. Fragmented periods of semi-consciousness between sessions of cold that jolts you awake. Hours spent preparing a sleeping spot that will never be truly comfortable. Decisions about where to lie down that might determine whether you see morning. This isn't about a single freezing night. It's about enduring dozens of them, hundreds, an entire season where every sunset begins the same calculation. Where will I sleep tonight? How will I stay warm enough? How will I stay safe? The human body begins losing its ability to maintain core temperature at 50 degrees. Not the deep cold of January, just 50 degrees. Add wind or dampness, and the threshold rises higher. Most deaths from exposure don't happen on the coldest nights of the year. They happen in autumn, in early winter, during transitional periods when people haven't yet adapted their strategies to falling temperatures. By deep winter, the people still on the street have learned what works, what keeps you alive. The knowledge they carry is sophisticated, technical, born from necessity. This is how people survive freezing nights when shelter isn't available, when every night demands everything you have just to reach another morning. Temperature alone doesn't tell the full story. A calm night at 25 degrees is survivable with the right preparation. A windy night at 40 degrees with rain can kill. The human body maintains a core temperature near 98.6 degrees. When that drops to 95, hypothermia begins. At 90, consciousness becomes unreliable. At 85, the heart stops. The body defends its core by sacrificing its extremities. Blood flow pulls away from fingers, toes, hands, feet. These parts become painful first, then numb, then damaged. Frostbite can begin at temperatures above freezing if exposure continues long enough. But it's not just the cold that threatens. Wind strips away the thin layer of warm air the body tries to maintain at the skin's surface. Every air movement steals heat. A 10-degree night with 15-mile-per-hour wind feels like -4 degrees to exposed skin. This wind chill isn't just discomfort. It's accelerated heat loss that the body must work harder to replace. Moisture makes everything worse. Water conducts heat away from the body 25 times faster than air. Rain soaks through clothing and destroys its insulating ability. Sweat does the same from inside. Even humidity makes cold more penetrating, more difficult to defend against. Snow brings its own complications. Wet snow soaks clothing. Light powder finds every gap in layers. Accumulation means waking periodically through the night to brush it off before it melts against body heat and then freezes into ice. The ground pulls heat down through conduction. Concrete, frozen earth, metal, all of these surfaces aggressively draw warmth from whatever touches them. A person can be wrapped in blankets, but still lose dangerous amounts of heat through their back and legs to the surface below. This is why cardboard matters. Why people sleep on grates. Why the choice of surface becomes as important as the choice of covering. The body's response to cold burns calories. Shivering is muscle contractions generating heat, but it requires fuel. Calories become survival currency. Without adequate food, the body cannot maintain its temperature even with perfect insulation. Cold weather homelessness means needing more calories precisely when calories become harder to obtain. Sleep itself creates vulnerability. The body's core temperature naturally drops during sleep. Metabolism slows. Heat production decreases. The resting body defends itself less effectively than the active body. This is why winter sleep for someone on the street is never truly deep. The body wakes you when temperature drops too far. You warm yourself through movement, or adjust your coverings, or change position. Then you try to sleep again. Then you wake from cold. The cycle repeats. Exhaustion accumulates. Each night adds to the deficit. After a week of fragmented sleep, judgment deteriorates. Reaction time slows. The ability to execute even basic survival tasks becomes compromised. After a month, the body begins failing in measurable ways. Immune function drops. Minor illnesses become major. Respiratory infections take hold and don't clear. Chronic conditions worsen without the recovery that proper rest enables. Cold weather isn't a single threat. It's a system of threats that reinforce each other. The temperature drops your core. Wind accelerates the process. Wet clothing removes your insulation. Inadequate calories mean you can't generate replacement heat. Exhaustion impairs your ability to problem solve. The cold ground beneath you continues stealing warmth even while you sleep. Managing all of these factors simultaneously requires knowledge that most housed people never acquire. The physics of heat loss. The signs of hypothermia in your own body. The difference between dangerous cold and merely uncomfortable cold. People living on the street become experts in these distinctions. They have to. The margin for error is too small. Cities create their own climate. Concrete and asphalt absorb solar radiation during the day and release it at night. Buildings trap heat from thousands of furnaces, water heaters, and human bodies. The urban core stays 5 to 15 degrees warmer than surrounding areas. For someone trying to survive a freezing night, these few degrees matter enormously. Within the city, some spots run even warmer. These locations form an informal map that exists in the collective knowledge of homeless communities. Subway grates are the most obvious sources. Below the street, trains run through tunnels that require climate control. In winter, this means heated air. The grates that ventilate these systems release warmth that rises in visible columns on cold nights. A person can stand on a subway grate and feel heat flowing upward. Lie down on one, and it creates a zone of relative warmth in freezing air. These spots are never empty. Someone claims each productive grate. That person might have slept there for months or years. Others know the spot is taken. There's an order to these things, a hierarchy built on time and presence, and sometimes on threat. Newcomers learn quickly which warm spots are available and which are held. Building exhaust vents work similarly. Restaurants, laundromats, buildings with commercial kitchens or large heating systems, all of them vent warm air outside. Some vents blow continuously. Others cycle on and off through the night. The best vents provide steady warmth from evening through early morning. They're positioned where the heat flows over a sleeping person without too much wind dispersing it. They're in locations where security doesn't immediately chase people away. Loading docks often have heat too. Warehouses and commercial buildings maintain interior temperatures, and the large dock doors leak warmth even when closed. The recessed areas provide wind protection. The concrete platforms, while cold themselves, elevate sleepers off the colder ground. These spaces appear after business hours close. They must be vacated before morning deliveries begin. The window of usability is limited, but valuable. Some parking garages stay marginally warmer than outside air. The structure provides wind protection, and if any cars remain overnight, their engines retain heat for hours. Underground garages, where available, protect from precipitation and trap slightly warmer air. Hospitals represent another heat source. The buildings run warm, and exterior walls radiate that heat. Emergency room entrances often have covered areas. The 24-hour operation means there's always some activity, which provides both safety through visibility and risk through potential removal. The same duality applies to transportation centers. Bus stations and train terminals offer warmth and shelter, but they also have security specifically tasked with preventing people from sleeping there. The goal becomes using the space for warming without sleeping, or sleeping so discreetly that you're not noticed. Fast food restaurants with 24-hour service provide another option. The warmth is undeniable, and bathrooms offer additional resources. But staying requires either purchasing something or being tolerated by staff. Both conditions are uncertain. Churches sometimes leave vestibules or covered entryways accessible. These protected spots offer dignity that pure street sleeping doesn't, though they're often discovered by multiple people and can become crowded. ATM vestibules provide minimal heated space. Some banks lock these at night now, precisely because people were using them for warmth. Those that remain open fit one person, maybe two. The hard tile floor and fluorescent lighting make actual sleep difficult, but the warmth is real. All of these locations exist on a spectrum from accessible to contested. The most accessible spots offer the least protection. The best protected spots come with the highest competition or the greatest risk of removal. Temperature isn't the only factor in the calculation. Safety matters. A warm spot in a completely isolated area means vulnerability to violence. A warm spot on a busy street means constant harassment or police attention. Visibility cuts both ways. Being seen means potential help if something goes wrong. Being seen also means being moved along or worse. Some people prioritize warmth above all else and accept the trade-offs. Others choose slightly colder locations that offer better concealment or security. There's no single right answer. Each person calibrates the balance based on experience and circumstance. The mental map develops over time. You learn which grates stay warm latest in the season, which vents blow strongest, which businesses tolerate your presence and which call police immediately, which areas of the city are patrolled heavily and which are largely ignored. You learn the microclimates within blocks. One side of a building faces the prevailing wind. The other side sits in a protected pocket. One underpass funnels wind into a tunnel. Another, just blocks away, creates a dead airspace. Weather changes the calculations. Rain makes some spots unusable because water flows through them. Wind makes others uninhabitable despite their heat. Snow closes access to certain locations entirely. The forecast becomes crucial information. Knowing that temperatures will drop 15 degrees overnight changes where you need to be by sunset. Knowing that snow is coming means securing a covered location before the storm arrives. This knowledge is shared, but not freely. Information has value in communities where resources are scarce. Someone might tell you about a decent spot after you've proven trustworthy, or they might tell you about a mediocre spot and keep the good locations to themselves. Experienced people can read a city block and identify potential sleeping locations that would be invisible to the housed. A recessed doorway with a specific depth. A service corridor that doesn't lock. A corner where two building walls meet and create a right angle that blocks wind from two directions. The urban heat map is detailed, personal, and constantly updated. What worked last year might not work this year if a business changed or a building increased security. What works on dry nights fails in rain. Every city has this invisible geography. Every homeless person surviving winter has learned to read it. The city is full of walls and roofs, concrete and steel, structures that create protected pockets within the larger cold. For someone sleeping outside, these man-made features become potential survival tools. Each offers something different. Each demands its own assessment. Bridge underpasses appear in almost every account of winter homelessness. The appeal is obvious: a massive concrete roof overhead, protection from snow and rain, walls or pillars that block some wind. The reality is more complicated. Bridges do keep precipitation off. Snow accumulates on either side, but not directly beneath the span. This matters. Staying dry is half the battle in freezing weather. Wet clothing loses all insulation value. Wet skin loses heat 25 times faster than dry skin. But bridges create their own problems. The underpass becomes a wind tunnel. Air funnels through the space with increased velocity. The same structure that blocks precipitation can amplify wind. On a night with sustained gusts, the effective temperature beneath a bridge may be lower than in an open field 100 yards away. The concrete itself radiates cold. These massive structures absorb cold during winter nights and release it slowly. The temperature immediately beneath a bridge deck often reads several degrees lower than the ambient air temperature. This affects anyone sleeping directly against concrete surfaces. Sound amplifies under bridges. Every passing vehicle creates a thunderous echo. Traffic noise that might be tolerable in open air becomes physically painful in the confined space. Sleep, already difficult in freezing temperatures, becomes nearly impossible on bridges that carry heavy traffic. Despite these drawbacks, bridges remain common sleeping locations. The protection from precipitation outweighs the other factors for many people. And bridges offer something else: a clear exit route in multiple directions. No one can approach without being seen and heard. Abandoned buildings present a different calculation. An empty structure with intact walls and roof provides genuine shelter. Temperature inside an abandoned building may be 10 or 15 degrees warmer than outside. 4 walls block wind completely. Multiple rooms offer choices about location and some ability to move if one area becomes compromised. But abandoned buildings carry serious risks. Structural integrity is always uncertain. Roofs may be partially collapsed. Floors may be unstable. Buildings abandoned long enough to become homeless sleeping sites are often abandoned because they've become dangerous. People have died in collapses. Fire is another constant threat. In winter, the temptation to build a small fire for warmth is powerful. Abandoned buildings often contain flammable materials. They're not monitored. A warming fire can become a structure fire quickly. Smoke can fill spaces before anyone wakes. Exit routes may be blocked by debris. Other people create risk. An abandoned building that can house one person can house 20. Populations in these spaces shift constantly. Conflicts emerge over territory, over possessions, over nothing at all. With multiple entrances and limited sight lines, there's no security. Violence in abandoned buildings is common enough that many people avoid them entirely, preferring the exposure of outdoor spaces to the enclosed danger of unsecured structures. The legal risk is clear. Entering abandoned buildings is trespassing. Police sweep these locations regularly. The pattern is predictable. A building becomes known as a sleeping site. Usage increases, neighbors complain, police clear everyone out, sometimes arresting people, always confiscating belongings. Then the cycle begins again. Despite all this, some abandoned buildings develop into semi-permanent communities during winter. Buildings with good bones, multiple rooms, Locations far enough from residential areas to avoid constant complaint. These become known. Information spreads. On the coldest nights, buildings like this may shelter dozens of people. Doorways and alcoves represent the minimum of structural protection. A recessed doorway provides a wall at your back and a roof overhead. The space is small, barely wide enough for one person and their belongings, but that wall blocks wind from one direction. The small roof prevents direct precipitation. The recess provides some psychological comfort. No one can approach from behind. Commercial doorways are contested spaces. The warmest ones, those in active buildings with heat leaking through doors, are claimed early. Hierarchies develop. Someone who has slept in a particular doorway for months may be willing to fight to keep it. But doorways are completely visible. Every passerby sees you. You are on display. Morning brings business owners who want you gone before customers arrive. Police receive calls. You're moved along repeatedly. The protection is minimal, but the exposure is total. Some alcoves offer more concealment. Loading docks, recessed dumpster areas, spaces technically private property, but not actively monitored at night. These combine some structural protection with reduced visibility. The trade-off remains constant. The best structural protection usually comes with the highest risks, from other people, from authorities, from the structures themselves. Every night requires this calculation. Weather conditions shift the equation. A night with heavy snow makes bridge underpasses essential despite the wind. A night of still, clear cold makes open spaces safer than confined ones. A night of rain makes any roof valuable, regardless of other drawbacks. Over time, people develop detailed mental maps of available structures. Which doorways are checked by police at what times? Which bridges are tolerable and which are unbearable? Which abandoned buildings are relatively safe and which are definitely not? This knowledge is survival knowledge. It's shared within homeless communities. Newcomers learn from those with more experience. Information about newly accessible buildings spreads quickly. Warnings about dangerous locations are passed along. The same city that housed people, design never considers, becomes a landscape of calculated choices for those sleeping outside. Every structure is assessed for what protection it offers and what dangers it presents. The search for shelter doesn't end with finding a roof. It continues every night, weighing options that all involve compromise. The built environment offers walls and roofs. The natural landscape offers different protections. Trees, hillsides, and terrain features become relevant in ways that are invisible to people moving through cities toward indoor destinations. For someone preparing to sleep outside in winter, these natural elements can mean the difference between survivable cold and dangerous exposure. Trees provide the most obvious natural shelter. A dense stand of evergreens blocks wind effectively. The needled branches diffuse gusts that would otherwise strike exposed skin. This windbreak effect can reduce wind chill significantly. On a night with 20-mile-per-hour winds, the effective temperature in a protected grove may be 10 degrees warmer than in an open area 50 feet away. Evergreens also block precipitation. Snow accumulates on branches rather than reaching the ground beneath. The effect is imperfect. Eventually, snow loads on branches reach capacity and release, dumping accumulated weight suddenly. But through most of a snowfall, the area beneath dense evergreens remains relatively clear. The ground under evergreen trees tends to be drier. Years of needle fall create a thick duff layer that resists moisture penetration. This matters enormously when the alternative is frozen mud or snow-covered concrete. A bed of dry pine needles provides some insulation from the ground. But evergreen groves have drawbacks. The same density that blocks wind also traps moisture. Air circulation decreases. In areas with heavy winter fog or morning condensation, evergreen groves can become damp environments. Clothing and bedding that might dry out in more exposed locations stay wet under trees. Evergreens provide concealment. This can be protection or danger depending on circumstances. Hidden from casual view means less harassment. It also means isolation. If something goes wrong, if hypothermia sets in, if there's an accident, no one will see you. No one will find you until much later. Deciduous trees in winter offer different characteristics. Without leaves, bare trees provide minimal wind protection, but their branch structure still diffuses wind somewhat, breaking sustained gusts into variable currents. The effect is subtle but real. Deciduous trees in parks and populated areas do offer something valuable: legitimacy. Someone sleeping beneath park trees is less immediately obvious than someone in a doorway. The setting provides some social camouflage. You might be resting. You might be homeless. The ambiguity provides brief protection from intervention. The ground beneath deciduous trees accumulates leaf litter in fall. By winter, this natural mulch layer has compacted somewhat but still provides insulation. Like evergreen needles, leaf litter creates a barrier between body and frozen ground. Terrain and elevation matter more than most people realize. Cold air is denser than warm air. At night, especially on calm, clear nights, cold air drains downward like water. Low-lying areas become cold sinks. Valleys, depressions, and flat bottomland collect the coldest air. Hillsides and elevated positions avoid this cold air pooling. The temperature difference can be substantial. In areas with significant topography, sleeping halfway up a hill may be 5 degrees warmer than sleeping in the valley below. This is counterintuitive. People naturally seek low, protected spots, but on calm winter nights, those protected valleys become the coldest locations. Exposed hillsides, despite feeling windier, may actually be warmer. The calculation changes with weather conditions. When strong winds dominate, wind chill becomes the primary factor, and low, protected areas do offer advantage. But on still nights, and winter produces many still, clear nights, elevation provides measurable benefit. Slope orientation affects morning sun exposure. In winter, when sun angle is low and daylight limited, a sleeping location that receives morning sun can begin warming hours before one in perpetual shadow. South-facing slopes and east-facing terrain capture precious early light. North-facing areas remain frozen longer. For someone who has endured freezing temperatures all night, first morning sun is intensely valuable. Its warmth, its psychological relief, it's the signal that the worst is over for another cycle. Water features create their own microclimates. Rivers and lakes moderate temperature somewhat. Large bodies of water release stored heat through winter, creating slightly warmer air immediately adjacent to shore. The effect is modest but real. Riverside areas may be a few degrees warmer than inland locations, but water also produces humidity. Moisture in air increases the subjective feeling of cold, and proximity to water means proximity to dampness, wet ground, fog, condensation on any surface that will hold it. Streams and rivers also create noise. Running water masks other sounds. This can be comforting. It provides acoustic privacy. It can also be dangerous. You won't hear someone approaching. Drainage patterns matter intensely. Low spots where water naturally flows become wet zones. Even without visible standing water, the ground in these areas remains saturated. Sleeping in a drainage channel or depression means lying on frozen mud that will conduct heat away from your body relentlessly. Experienced homeless individuals develop detailed knowledge of which areas stay dry and which turn to mud. This information isn't marked anywhere. It's learned through observation and bitter experience. Urban vegetation patterns tell stories about underlying conditions. Areas with thick brush growth indicate moisture. Areas with sparse, scrubby vegetation suggest better drainage. These are subtle cues, but they're legible if you know how to read them. Parks and vegetated areas attract homeless sleepers precisely because they offer these natural features. But parks also attract police attention. Most cities have ordinances against sleeping in parks. Enforcement varies, but the pattern is familiar. Someone finds a good sleeping spot in vegetation, uses it successfully for a period, then is discovered and moved along. The cat and mouse game of finding and being displaced from natural sleeping sites consumes enormous energy. Each displacement means losing a known location and having to assess new possibilities. Natural features don't exist in isolation. The most effective sleeping locations combine structural and natural protection. A bridge underpass on elevated ground with vegetation nearby. An alcove on the south side of a building with trees for concealment. A doorway positioned to catch morning sun. Reading the landscape for survival information is a skill that develops through necessity. What seems like random landscape becomes a detailed map of more survivable and less survivable locations. But even the best natural site offers limited protection. Trees block some wind, but not cold. Hillsides are warmer, but still freezing. The landscape of survival is still a landscape of endurance. Every evening, as the sun drops and temperature follows, a calculation begins. It's not written down. It's not conscious in the way a spreadsheet is conscious, but it's complex, multivariable, life-preserving. The question is simple. Where will you try to sleep tonight? The answer is never simple, because every location offers something, and every location costs something. The trade-offs shift with weather, with day of the week, with what happened last night or last week, with who you are and what you carry and whether you're alone. There is no perfect spot. There are only negotiated compromises between competing needs that don't align. Warmth matters, obviously. Freezing to death is a real possibility, not a metaphor. But safety matters too, from other people, from police, from weather events you can't see coming. Visibility is its own calculation. Being seen means being moved along, harassed, sometimes worse. Being hidden means no one finds you if something goes wrong. Access to resources, bathrooms, water, morning warming centers, that matters. But those resources cluster near people, near visibility, near the places you'll be told to move. The mental map that develops is detailed, specific. It updates constantly. This doorway offers wind, protection, but store security checks it twice a night. That underpass stays dry, but 3 others already claim it, and territorial disputes aren't worth the risk. The library steps are warm from building heat, but police sweep them at 11. The park bench near the steam vent is perfect until it isn't, until someone else knows about it, until maintenance reroutes the steam, until the exposure becomes too much. Weather changes everything overnight. Rain makes the usual spot unusable. Wind eliminates locations that felt protected yesterday. A temperature drop of 10 degrees transforms a tolerable place into a dangerous one. The calculation adjusts. You move to Plan B, except others moved to their Plan B, which was your Plan B. Now you're on Plan D, a spot you know isn't good enough, but it's 8 o'clock and you're exhausted, and the search has to end somewhere. Day of the week matters more than you'd expect. Friday and Saturday nights mean more people out late, more drinking, more unpredictability, more danger from bored groups looking for entertainment, which sometimes means finding someone vulnerable. Sunday through Thursday are quieter, marginally safer. The calculus shifts slightly toward more visible locations because fewer people are around to see you. The season adds another layer. In deep winter, warmth becomes the overwhelming priority. You risk more visibility, more conflict over prime spots, more police contact, because cold kills faster than other dangers. In fall and early spring, the transition seasons, the calculation is harder. Temperatures swing. What works tonight fails tomorrow. You guess wrong and you don't sleep, or you sleep wrong and wake up hypothermic. Some spots are contested, others aren't. The warmest places are known. The subway grate that blows heat, the loading dock with the idling trucks, the corner where 3 buildings create a pocket that blocks wind and reflects heat. Everyone knows these spots. Hierarchies form, informal but enforced. The person who's been on the street longest, or the most intimidating, or the one who simply arrived first and won't be moved, they get the best spot. Others take what's left. Newcomers get the worst positions, the most exposed, the most visible, the most likely to be rousted. They learn through cold nights and mistakes. They watch who goes where. They listen to advice from others, if they're offered it. They build their own mental map slowly, through trial and error that sometimes carries real cost. Some people rotate locations intentionally, not from preference, but from necessity. Stay in one place too many nights, and you become known. Store owners call police. Security guards remember your face. Other homeless individuals assume you're claiming territory. Moving every 2 or 3 nights reduces these frictions, but it also means never optimizing a spot, never building the small improvements that make a location more livable. The things you carry influence where you can go. More belongings mean more bulk, more visibility, more to protect. It eliminates certain locations. You can't navigate narrow spaces. You can't move quickly if you need to. You become a larger target for theft. But the belongings themselves, the extra blankets, the tarp, the sleeping bag if you have one, those items are what keep you alive. The calculation again. Carry more and be safer from cold, but less safe from people. Or carry less and stay mobile, but freeze. Proximity to others is its own complex variable. Sleeping near other homeless individuals provides some safety. Someone might notice if something goes wrong. There's social pressure that discourages theft within the group, but it also concentrates vulnerability in one place. It draws attention. It creates conflicts over space and resources. And if violence comes, it comes to where people gather. Sleeping alone means isolation. No help if you need it, but also invisibility. No competition, no social navigation. Some people choose this deliberately. Others have no choice. They've been pushed out of the informal communities for reasons that range from legitimate to arbitrary. The built environment offers different protections depending on architecture. A deep doorway with a recessed entrance provides wind block and some concealment. But it's private property. The owner or tenant has every right to make you leave. An underpass is public space. Legally, you have more claim to be there. But it's also exposed on both ends. Wind tunnels through. Sound carries. You hear everything coming, but you're also heard. Some people prefer height. A second-floor exterior stairwell. A parking garage's upper level. The advantage is that predators, human and animal, are less likely to check elevated positions. The disadvantage is limited escape routes. If trouble comes up the stairs, there's nowhere to go but up. Others want grade-level access. The ability to move quickly matters more than concealment. If you need to run, you can. If something goes wrong, you're not trapped. The vulnerability of exposure is traded for the security of mobility. Heat sources create their own risk concentrations. Everyone wants heat. So heat sources draw crowds. Crowds draw attention. Attention draws police, security, sometimes predators. The warmth that saves you might cost you in other ways. You calculate, freeze slowly in isolation, or stay warm with a dozen others and accept the complications that come with that. Weather forecasts matter enormously when you can access them. A library computer, a phone with limited battery and data, a conversation with someone who heard the news. Knowing that tonight drops to 15 degrees versus 25 degrees changes everything. You prepare differently. You might try for a shelter if the threshold triggers overflow capacity. You definitely don't choose the exposed spot that worked last week when it was 40. But forecasts aren't always available, and they're not always accurate, and plans built on forecasts fall apart when reality diverges. Then you adapt midnight, which is harder, colder, more desperate. Some people have backup locations ranked and memorized. Spot 1, the best option if available. Spot 2, if spot 1 is taken or unsafe tonight. Spot 3, if the first 2 fail. Spot 4, the last resort, the place you'll go when every other option has collapsed. Having this ranked list in your head means you're not making decisions in crisis. You're following a plan built during daylight, when thinking was clearer. Others decide in the moment. They walk until they find something. This works if you know the area well, if you have energy left after a day of survival. It doesn't work when you're exhausted, when it's already late, when you're new or in an unfamiliar neighborhood. The calculation never ends. Even after you settle, you're recalculating. Is this working? Is it safe? Is it warm enough? Should you move? The decision to sleep, to actually surrender consciousness, is delayed by constant assessment. You don't just lie down and sleep. You lie down and monitor. You wake every hour or every 30 minutes and reassess. The calculation runs all night. This is the invisible cognitive load of homelessness in winter. Not just surviving, but constantly calculating survival. Running scenarios, weighing risks, updating information, making decisions that housed people make once, where to sleep, every single night, with stakes that housed people never face. The mental exhaustion is real. The weight of endless decision-making with imperfect information and no good options. The knowledge that you'll get it wrong sometimes. That the margin for error is thin. That a bad calculation doesn't just mean discomfort. It can mean frostbite, hypothermia, assault, death. And tomorrow night, you'll do it again. The human body generates heat constantly. Even at rest, metabolic processes produce warmth as a byproduct of staying alive. Muscles burn fuel. Organs function. Blood circulates. This creates a baseline temperature around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The problem isn't generating heat. The problem is keeping it. Heat moves, always, from warmer objects to cooler ones, from your body to the air around you, from your skin to the ground beneath you, from your core to your extremities, then out into the night. This transfer happens through several mechanisms. Conduction, direct contact between your body and something colder, your back against frozen concrete, your hands touching metal. Heat flows out of you into the material. Concrete and metal are particularly aggressive conductors. They pull heat away rapidly. Convection, air movement carrying heat away. Wind strips warmth from exposed skin. Even in still air, Your body heats the immediate layer touching your skin. That warmer air rises, cool air replaces it, and the cycle continues. This is why wind chill matters. Moving air accelerates heat loss. Radiation. Your body emits infrared radiation constantly, bleeding heat into the environment without needing contact or air movement. Even in a perfectly still, non-touching situation, you're radiating warmth into the cold. Evaporation. Moisture on your skin, sweat, rain, melted snow, requires heat energy to evaporate. It pulls that energy from your body. This is why getting wet in winter is so dangerous. Evaporative cooling works extremely efficiently. Insulation works by interrupting these transfers. The principle is simple. Trap air in small pockets close to your body. Air is a poor conductor of heat. When it's held still in tiny spaces, it can't convect away your warmth. So layers of trapped, dead air become barriers between your heat and the cold outside. This is why multiple thin layers outperform one thick layer. Each interface between layers traps an additional air pocket. 3 shirts create 2 air gaps between them plus the space between fabric fibers themselves. That's 3 insulating zones. One thick jacket might provide the same total thickness, but fewer trapped air interfaces. The spacing between layers matters too. Too tight and you compress the air out, destroying the insulation. Too loose and air can circulate, carrying heat away. The ideal is just enough space that air is trapped but not moving. Homeless individuals learn this principle through experience, not physics classes. They layer everything available. 2 pairs of pants, 3 shirts, a jacket over a hoodie over a button-up over a t-shirt. Not from fashion choices, but from empirical observation. More layers mean staying warmer longer. The materials matter significantly. Synthetic fibers and wool retain insulating properties even when damp. Cotton does not. Cotton absorbs water, loses its loft, and conducts heat away when wet. Cotton kills is a wilderness survival axiom that applies equally on city streets. But cotton is everywhere. Donated clothes are often cotton, free t-shirts from events, cheap cotton blends from thrift stores. So cotton gets worn because it's available, and people manage the risk by trying to stay dry and layering cotton between other materials that provide some protection, even if the cotton fails. Cardboard is surprisingly effective insulation. The corrugated structure, those wavy ridges between flat sheets, creates thousands of tiny air pockets. A layer of cardboard under your body, between you and the ground, provides measurable insulation. Its R value per inch is comparable to foam board insulation used in construction. People who don't live on the streets often assume cardboard is just for padding, for comfort. It's not about comfort. It's about thermodynamics. It's about creating a thermal break between your body and the surface that wants to conduct your heat away. Newspaper works similarly when crumpled and stuffed inside clothing. The crumpling is essential. Flat newspaper does almost nothing. Crumpled newspaper creates 3-dimensional air pockets. Stuff it inside your shirt, between layers, and you've added insulation. Stuff it inside your shoes, around your feet, and you've protected your extremities from both conduction through the sole and convection inside the shoe. Plastic bags serve a different function. Plastic is waterproof. Water is the enemy of insulation. So plastic bags become vapor barriers. Wear a plastic bag over your socks before putting your foot in your shoe. Now the shoe stays dry even if you step in slush. Your sock stays dry. Your insulation keeps working. Plastic bags as outer layers on hands, over mittens or gloves, protect the insulation underneath. Plastic bags wrapped around cardboard keep the cardboard dry. maintaining its insulating properties through rain or snow. The strategy is systematic: insulating layers inside, vapor barrier outside. But plastic doesn't breathe. Moisture from your body, and your body always produces moisture, gets trapped inside. This creates a management problem. The plastic keeps external wet out, but traps internal moisture in. Over time, this moisture accumulates, eventually wetting the insulation from the inside. There's no perfect solution with available materials. You accept the trade-off. Plastic keeps you drier longer than no plastic. You manage the moisture when you can, drying things out during the day if the sun appears, if you have access to warm indoor air that can evaporate the dampness. Covering the head and neck is critical, despite the myth about head heat loss. The myth says you lose 50% or more of body heat through your head. This isn't true if everything else is covered, but it contains truth. Your head has high surface area, thin skin, and typically poor insulation. Most people don't have layers of hair thick enough to matter. So yes, cover your head. A hat, a hood, anything. The neck is a particular vulnerability. Major blood vessels run close to the surface. Cold air on your neck cools the blood flowing to your brain. This triggers stronger perception of being cold overall. A scarf or high collar protects this zone disproportionately to its surface area. Extremities present a cruel problem. Your body prioritizes core temperature. When it's cold, circulation to hands and feet is reduced to preserve heat for vital organs. This makes fingers and toes cold first and fastest. There are also high surface area appendages, lots of skin area losing heat relative to their volume. Gloves and socks help, but only if they're dry and layered properly. Wet socks do worse than no socks. Tight gloves that restrict circulation do worse than no gloves. The ideal, loose, dry, insulating layers on hands and feet is hard to maintain. Some people keep their hands in their pockets constantly. Others tuck them into armpits when possible. These positions put extremities close to core heat, borrowing warmth from the torso. Feet are harder. You can't practically keep them near your core. You rely entirely on insulation and whatever heat your body is willing to send that far. The ground below you conducts heat aggressively. You can have perfect insulation everywhere else and still lose dangerous amounts of heat to the surface you're lying on. Concrete, asphalt, frozen earth, these materials have high thermal mass and conductivity. They function as infinite heat sinks, pulling warmth out of you all night. Insulation below you is often more critical than insulation above. A sleeping bag with nothing underneath is only half useful. Your body weight compresses the insulation on the bottom side, reducing its effectiveness. Meanwhile, you're pressed directly against the surface. Heat flows out constantly. Cardboard, foam, additional clothing, blankets, anything that creates a barrier between body and ground. This is essential. Street experienced people know this. Newcomers often don't. They think covering themselves matters most. They wake up freezing from below and don't understand why their blankets didn't help. Layering is dynamic, not static. You adjust constantly, adding layers as temperature drops, removing a layer if you're walking and generating heat because sweating into your insulation is dangerous, then adding it back when you stop moving. Managing the system requires attention and energy. At night, you're balancing insulation against mobility. More layers mean more warmth, but also more bulk. Harder to move, harder to respond if you need to leave quickly. Some people sleep partially dressed. With extra layers nearby they can add or remove. Others wear everything at once, accepting the mobility cost for the warmth benefit. There's a threshold where more layers stop helping. When you've compressed the inner layers so much that air is squeezed out, additional outer layers just add weight. When bulk becomes so great that body heat can't reach the outer layers, you're insulating the outside from your inside. There's a point of diminishing returns that varies by materials and conditions. Wind protection multiplies the effectiveness of everything else. All your trapped air layers do nothing if wind can penetrate to your body. Wind breaks through loose fabrics, finds gaps at cuffs and collars, circulates through the layer system. An outer windproof layer, a jacket designed to block air movement, or even a tarp wrapped around you, transforms the performance of everything underneath. Homeless individuals become expert at finding wind blocks in the environment, corners where buildings meet, recessed doorways, the lee side of walls. Positioning matters as much as clothing. You orient your body to minimize exposure to wind direction. You use structures and geography as part of your insulation system. The sophistication of this knowledge is remarkable. It's not taught formally. There's no class, no manual. It's learned through cold nights and observation and advice, shared between people who've survived. It's thermodynamics and materials, science learned through necessity, applied with whatever resources exist. The resourcefulness required is constant. When a jacket tears, you repair it with tape or plastic to maintain wind protection. When socks wear through, you layer the holy pair with another holy pair, offsetting the holes. When you find a plastic bag, you evaluate whether it's better used as a vapor barrier for your feet, as a waterproof layer over your cardboard, or as a protective cover for items that can't get wet. Every material is assessed for its insulating or protective properties. Every found object is evaluated. This foam scrap, that piece of bubble wrap, these newspapers, that discarded sleeping pad. Nothing is trash if it traps air or blocks wind or creates distance from the ground. The effort invested in building and maintaining this insulation system is invisible to people passing by. They see someone bundled in layers and assume it's random, chaotic, just wearing everything they own. They don't see the systematic approach, the specific ordering of layers, the strategic placement of vapor barriers, the carefully maintained ground insulation, the constant adjustment and management of the entire system. This is survival knowledge as sophisticated as any technical skill. It requires understanding principles, adapting to conditions, working with limited resources, and maintaining discipline in application. It requires doing all of this while exhausted, while hungry, while dealing with every other challenge of homelessness. And it requires doing it every single day. Because insulation doesn't maintain itself. Materials get wet, compressed, lost, worn out. The system needs constant attention, repair, and rebuilding. The alternative to maintaining this system is freezing. So the knowledge develops. The skills sharpen. The management becomes routine. Because when shelter doesn't exist, insulation is what stands between your body heat and the night that wants to take it. Cardboard becomes something different in freezing weather. It stops being trash. It becomes structure, insulation, a barrier between a body and the cold that radiates up from concrete. A single layer of corrugated cardboard has an R value close to foam board insulation. The fluted channels inside trap air. Air is a poor conductor of heat. That's the principle. That's what keeps warmth close to the body, instead of letting it bleed away into the night. Someone who has survived multiple winters knows this. They know which cardboard is best. Appliance boxes are thick, double-walled. A refrigerator box broken down flat provides enough material to insulate underneath and create a windbreak. It's heavy to carry. But on a night when temperatures drop into the teens, That weight is worth it. The cardboard goes down first, directly on the concrete or ground. This is not negotiable. The earth pulls heat from the body faster than cold air does. Conduction is immediate, constant. A person lying directly on frozen ground will lose body heat rapidly, no matter how many blankets cover them from above. So the cardboard goes down. Sometimes multiple layers. Sometimes a wooden pallet first, then cardboard on top of that. The goal is separation, airspace, anything that interrupts the direct transfer of heat from body to ground. Newspaper serves a different function. It crumples, folds, fits inside clothing. Someone preparing for a freezing night will stuff newspaper inside their jacket, between layers of shirts, inside pant legs, around the torso. The paper creates air pockets. Those pockets trap warmth generated by the body. Each crumpled sheet adds another thin layer of insulation. It's not much, but thin layers accumulate. They add up to survival. The technique requires newspaper that's dry. Wet paper has no insulating value. It conducts heat away from the body, so the paper must be kept dry during the day, protected, stored inside plastic bags until it's needed. Plastic bags themselves become tools. A garbage bag with holes cut for head and arms becomes a vapor barrier. It's worn as a middle layer, not against the skin that traps sweat and moisture, not as the outer layer that tears too easily, but in the middle of the clothing system. It blocks wind, holds in the small amount of warmth the body generates. Plastic bags also go over socks, inside shoes if the shoes are large enough. This isn't about waterproofing. It's about trapping air, creating one more layer between skin and cold. The materials are specific because the principles are specific. Everything comes back to insulation, to trapping air, to blocking wind, to staying dry. Someone who understands this carries their materials with them. A compression of cardboard folded and tied with string, plastic bags nested inside each other, newspaper bundled and kept in a backpack or shopping cart. These materials are currency. They're survival equipment. Losing them means starting over, searching through dumpsters and recycling bins to rebuild the system. Blankets and comforters appear differently in this context. A donated blanket is useful, but a comforter, thick, filled with synthetic batting or down, is better. The filling creates loft, airspace. The same principle as the newspaper, but on a larger scale. Wool blankets are prized above most others. Wool retains insulating properties even when damp. It wicks moisture away from the body. A wool blanket from a military surplus store or a thrift shop is kept, protected, used carefully so it lasts. But most blankets available are not wool. They're cotton or thin acrylic. These materials lose their insulating value when wet, so they must be kept dry. This means carrying plastic sheeting, a tarp, something to wrap the blankets in during the day, something to keep rain and snow from soaking into the fibers. The plastic sheeting serves multiple purposes. It goes under the body as a moisture barrier. It wraps around the blankets. In some configurations, it creates a simple tent structure, draped over a shopping cart or propped up with found objects to form a windbreak and roof. This creates what's called a micro-environment, a small space that can be warmed by body heat. It's not truly warm, but it's warmer than the open air. 5 degrees warmer, 10 degrees. That difference matters when the temperature drops below freezing. The system requires constant maintenance. Cardboard gets wet and loses its structure. It must be replaced. Plastic tears. Tape and string used to hold things together wear out. Each day involves assessment, repair. The search for replacement materials before they're urgently needed. Someone new to street homelessness often doesn't know these principles. They might have a blanket, a jacket, but they don't understand the layering, the insulation from below, the need to stay dry. They learn through cold nights, through waking, shivering, and exhausted, through conversations with others who teach them what works. The knowledge passes informally. Someone sees another person shivering and shares what they know, shows them how to layer newspaper, where to find good cardboard, how to wrap themselves effectively. The teaching is practical, direct. There's no time for unclear instruction when someone is at risk, so the experienced guide the inexperienced. Materials are sometimes shared. A piece of plastic sheeting given to someone who has none. An extra blanket passed on. The materials themselves are humble, trash by most definitions. But in the context of winter survival, they become sophisticated tools. Each piece chosen for specific properties, each layer serving a defined purpose. Together, they form a system that makes sleep possible. That keeps body temperature within survivable range. That allows someone to wake up in the morning instead of slipping into hypothermia during the night. The system is never perfect, never completely comfortable, but it's the result of accumulated knowledge, of trial and error, of understanding the physics of heat and cold through direct experience. It's survival technology built from waste materials, and it works just well enough to keep people alive. The cold rises from concrete. It doesn't feel like rising. It feels like sinking, like the ground is pulling warmth out of the body, drawing it down and away. This is conduction, direct heat transfer. Concrete is dense. It holds cold the way it holds heat in summer. At night, especially in winter, it becomes a massive heat sink. Any warmth that touches it is absorbed, conducted away. A person lying on concrete in freezing weather will lose body heat through their back, hips, shoulders, and legs faster than through any other mechanism. Faster than wind. Faster than cold air. The contact is continuous. The heat loss is steady and relentless. This is why insulation from below matters more than covering from above. Someone can pile 3 blankets on top of themselves, but if they're lying directly on frozen concrete, those blankets do limited good. The cold comes from underneath. It presses up through clothing, through skin. It pulls core temperature down degree by degree. The experienced know this. They know the ground is the priority, so they build a barrier. The simplest version is cardboard. Flattened boxes laid on the concrete. The corrugated structure creates air gaps. Those gaps slow conduction, not eliminate it. Slow it. 1 layer of cardboard helps. 2 layers help more. 3 layers create enough insulation that body heat isn't immediately sucked away. The cardboard compresses under body weight. The air pockets flatten somewhat. But even compressed, the material provides separation, a buffer zone between body and ground. Wooden pallets are better. They're rigid. They don't compress. They create a platform that raises the body an inch or 2 off the ground. Air circulates underneath. That circulation prevents the direct conduction that happens with surface contact. Pallets are heavy, difficult to transport, but near industrial areas or behind stores, they're available. Someone who has a regular sleeping spot might move a pallet into position and leave it there. Hidden during the day, used each night, the pallet alone isn't enough. It's a frame, a foundation. But air still moves through the gaps between slats, so cardboard goes on top of the pallet, or foam padding, or layers of newspaper, something to fill the gaps and create a continuous insulating surface. Foam padding is rare. A camping mat. A piece of foam from discarded furniture. These materials have real R value. They're designed to insulate. Someone who finds foam padding keeps it, protects it. It's lighter than cardboard and more effective. But most people don't have foam. They have cardboard, newspaper, plastic bags stuffed with more plastic bags to create bulk and loft. The principle remains the same regardless of materials. Create separation, trap air, prevent direct contact between body and cold ground. Grass and dirt are different from concrete. Soil is less conductive than pavement. It doesn't pull heat away as aggressively. But frozen ground is still frozen ground. It's still cold, still dangerous. In parks or undeveloped areas, the strategy changes slightly. Someone might scrape away the top layer of soil or snow to reach earth that's slightly less frozen. They might pile leaves or pine needles to create a cushioning layer. Natural materials have some insulating value. Not much, but some. The leaves compress under body weight. They mat down. But even matted, they provide more insulation than bare ground. They're also quiet. They don't crackle like plastic or slide like cardboard. In places where staying unnoticed matters, natural materials have advantages beyond insulation. Snow itself creates problems. It's cold, obviously, but it's also wet. Moisture conducts heat away from the body even faster than cold air, so someone sleeping in an area with snow must create a barrier against the snow. Plastic sheeting, a tarp, something waterproof between the snow and their insulation materials. Some people dig. In areas where snow is deep, it's possible to dig down to bare ground, or to create a shallow depression that provides wind protection. The depression is lined with plastic, then cardboard, then blankets. The snow around the edges acts as a windbreak. This is shelter building, temporary, makeshift, but it applies principles that have kept people alive in cold climates for millennia. Wind protection, insulation from the ground, a small space that can be warmed by body heat. The floor of this improvised shelter is the critical element. A person can survive a cold night with minimal covering if the ground insulation is good. But even the best blankets won't save someone who's losing heat through direct ground contact. Body parts that press against the ground need the most protection. Hips, shoulders, the side of the torso. These contact points create thermal bridges, places where insulation is compressed and heat flows more easily to the cold surface below. Some people side sleep with extra cardboard folded under their hip, or they stuff a jacket under their side. Anything to add thickness at the pressure points. The goal is to maintain loft, to keep the insulating layers from compressing completely flat. This requires awareness. Adjustment through the night. Someone wakes from cold and realizes their hip has compressed the cardboard beneath it. They shift position, add more material, try to restore the air gaps that provide insulation. The process is exhausting. Sleep is already fragmented by cold. Adding the need to constantly monitor and adjust insulation makes rest nearly impossible. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is letting conduction win, letting the ground pull heat from the body continuously until core temperature drops into dangerous territory. So people wake, adjust, shift position, add materials, remove materials that have become damp from condensation. It's active survival. It requires consciousness and effort. It's incompatible with deep sleep. In doorways and under overhangs, concrete is still the enemy. The walls might block wind. The overhang might stop rain. But the floor is still concrete, still conductive, still pulling heat away. The first thing someone does when settling into a doorway is address the ground. Cardboard goes down, a sleeping pad if they have one, plastic bags filled with newspaper. whatever creates thickness and airspace. Only after the ground is addressed do they think about covering, about blankets and what goes on top. Because they know from experience, from cold nights and near misses, that the ground is where the battle is lost or won. This knowledge isn't written down. It's learned through the body, through waking, shivering, and realizing the cold is coming from below, through watching others, through advice given and received in the informal networks of people surviving on the street. It's sophisticated understanding, born of necessity. The physics of heat transfer translated into practical action. The recognition that in winter, the ground is not neutral. It's actively dangerous. And surviving means treating it as such. The goal is not to stay warm. That is not possible. The goal is to create a small zone where the body loses heat slowly enough to survive until morning. This is the principle behind every wrapping technique used on winter streets. The burrito method is the most sophisticated. The name comes from the technique itself, wrapping the body in layers that overlap and seal, leaving no gaps where warmth can escape. It begins with the base layer. Cardboard or foam padding goes directly on the ground. Not one piece, several, overlapped so cold cannot seep through the seams. The sleeping surface must be wider than the body. When someone lies down, their weight compresses the insulation beneath them. If the padding is too narrow, shoulders or hips extend past the edge. Those parts of the body rest directly on concrete. Heat drains away immediately. Next comes the person, wearing every layer of clothing they own. Then the wrapping begins. A blanket is laid flat. The person lies near one edge, not in the center. One side of the blanket is pulled across the body. Then the person rolls, wrapping themselves in the fabric. The other edge is tucked beneath the body weight, sealing the seam. A second blanket repeats the process in the opposite direction. Now the person is wrapped twice, with both seams underneath. If there is a third blanket, it goes over the top, tucked in on both sides. The result is a fabric shell with no openings except the face. Wind cannot penetrate. Body heat, trapped in the air pockets between layers, stays close to the skin. But the method only works if it is done correctly. If the blankets are loose, air circulates through the wrapping. The microenvironment is broken. If they are too tight, they compress the clothing layers beneath, eliminating the insulation those layers provide. The face remains exposed. Covering the mouth and nose with fabric seems logical, but breath contains moisture. That moisture condenses on the fabric in freezing temperatures. The fabric becomes damp, then cold. A cold, wet covering against the face pulls heat away faster than no covering at all. So the face stays out, no matter how cold the air. Plastic sheeting adds another dimension. A tarp or heavy plastic bag can wrap around the outside of the entire bundle. This creates a vapor barrier. Body heat that radiates outward hits the plastic and reflects back instead of escaping into the air. The plastic also blocks wind completely. But plastic is a trade-off. It stops heat from leaving, but it also traps moisture. Breath, sweat, and body humidity condense on the inside surface of the plastic. If the night is long enough, everything inside becomes damp. Damp insulation loses most of its effectiveness. By dawn, the person may be colder than they would have been without the plastic. Experienced individuals know when to use plastic and when to avoid it. On the coldest nights, below 20 degrees, the moisture problem is worth the extra warmth. On merely cold nights, 30s and 40s, the dampness creates more problems than it solves. A true sleeping bag changes everything. A cold weather sleeping bag rated for 0 degrees or below is the most valuable item a homeless person can own. It provides insulation on all sides simultaneously. It is designed to trap air in precise compartments where body heat accumulates. The zipper seals the environment completely, but sleeping bags rated for extreme cold cost hundreds of dollars. They are rare on the streets. When someone has one, it is guarded constantly. Theft is a persistent threat. A sleeping bag left unattended, even for minutes, often disappears. More common are summer weight sleeping bags, rated for 50 degrees. These provide some help, but not enough on their own. They must be supplemented with blankets, plastic, and every other available layer. Even then, they are barely adequate. The concept behind all of these techniques is the microenvironment. A person cannot warm the open air, but they can warm a small pocket of air immediately around their body. The smaller that pocket, the easier it is to heat. The better it is sealed, the longer the warmth lasts. This is why wrapping tight and eliminating gaps is essential. Every opening is a place where the laboriously warmed air escapes and freezing air rushes in. The burrito method works because it creates the smallest manageable environment. The body is enclosed. Heat has nowhere to go except into the trapped air in the layers. That air warms slowly over the first hour. If the wrapping holds, that warmth persists. Sleep becomes possible, not comfortable, never comfortable, but possible. Movement disrupts everything. Rolling over pulls one edge of the blankets loose. Cold air pours in along the back or side. The person wakes. They must unwrap, adjust the layers, and re-wrap themselves. By the time they finish, they are fully awake and cold again. It takes another 30 minutes for the microenvironment to re-warm. This is one reason why deep sleep almost never happens. The slightest shift breaks the seal. Some people solve this by wrapping so tightly they cannot move at all. They sacrifice comfort for thermal stability. Others accept that they will wake every hour or two to repair the wrapping. There is no perfect solution. Every method is a compromise between warmth, mobility, and the need to respond quickly if danger appears. The microenvironment is fragile. It depends on materials that are often damaged, dirty, or inadequate. It depends on knowledge that must be learned through trial and cold nights. It depends on the energy to execute the wrapping correctly when exhaustion makes even small tasks difficult. But when it works, it is the difference between surviving the night and becoming a cold weather fatality. The technique is passed from person to person. Someone who has survived 5 winters shows someone facing their first winter how to wrap correctly, how to overlap the edges, how to tuck the seams, how to position the plastic. This knowledge is survival knowledge. It is as essential as finding food or water, and it is knowledge that should not be necessary. The night begins while there is still light. Sunset in winter comes early. By 5 in the evening, shadows stretch long across the pavement. By 6, the temperature has dropped noticeably. People begin moving toward their sleeping locations. This is not a simple matter of lying down. The evening phase is preparation. It is scouting, gathering, negotiating, and constructing the small systems that might make survival possible. First, the location must be chosen. If someone has slept in the same spot for weeks, this is already decided. But even familiar spots must be checked. Is the grate still warm? Has the alcove been claimed by someone else? Is there new security or police presence? A location that was safe last night may be unusable tonight. For those without a regular spot, the search is more urgent. They walk through the city, scanning for options. A doorway with an overhang deep enough to block wind. A loading dock where trucks are parked for the night, providing a windbreak. a corner where two buildings meet, creating a pocket that traps warmer air. Each possibility is evaluated quickly. Is it visible from the street? Is it near other people or isolated? Will business owners or residents call the police? Is the ground concrete, brick, or metal? The answers determine whether the spot is viable. Once a location is chosen, the gathering phase begins. Cardboard must be found. Dumpsters behind stores often have flattened boxes. These are pulled out, inspected for dryness, and carried to the sleeping spot. Newspapers are collected from recycling bins or trash cans. Plastic bags are saved from earlier in the day. Every material has a purpose in the construction that will happen later. Some people have hidden stashes, a pile of blankets tucked behind a dumpster, foam padding shoved into the gap between two buildings. These are retrieved carefully. Theft is common, and anything left in the open will disappear. Stashing materials requires finding a location that is hidden but memorable, obscure but retrievable. It is a constant balance. By the time darkness is complete, the construction begins. Cardboard is laid out in overlapping layers. Blankets are positioned. The sleeping system is assembled piece by piece, the same way it will be disassembled at dawn. This is also the social hour. People talk, information is shared. Someone mentions that the shelter on 4th Street is full, but the one on 9th still has beds. Someone else reports that police have been sweeping the park, forcing people to move. Another person warns that a particular block has seen assaults in the past week. This information network is crucial. It spreads knowledge faster than any official system. It identifies dangers and resources in real time. It is one of the few advantages of visibility. When many people are watching, threats are noticed quickly. Food is sometimes shared. Someone who had a good day panhandling might have extra. A church group may have distributed sandwiches earlier, and someone who received 2 offers one to another person. These exchanges are not automatic. Trust is required, but within established groups, reciprocity exists. Help given tonight may be returned next week. There are also conflicts, disputes over space, accusations of theft, old grudges that resurface. These are usually resolved without violence, but not always. Tensions are higher in winter. Everyone is more desperate. Every warm spot is more contested. By 8 or 9 in the evening, most people are settled. The wrapping process begins. Layers are adjusted. Positions are tested. Some people sit for a while before lying down, delaying the moment when the cold from the ground begins to seep upward. Others lie down immediately, trying to warm their microenvironment before exhaustion or cold makes sleep impossible. The city changes around them. Businesses close. Traffic thins. The daytime population goes indoors. The people on the street become more visible by contrast, even as they try to disappear into shadows and corners. This is when outreach workers sometimes appear. Vans pull up near known encampments. Volunteers step out with blankets, hand warmers, hot drinks. They ask if anyone needs medical attention. They offer information about shelters. Some people accept the help, others refuse, unwilling to give up their spot or distrustful of the system the workers represent. The interactions are brief. The workers do not push. They leave supplies and move on. Late night is also when some people make last rounds to dumpsters. Restaurants throw out food when they close. Bakeries discard day-old bread. Timing this correctly means finding items that are still edible. Arriving too early means the food is not out yet. Arriving too late means someone else has already taken it. This choreography is learned over time. By midnight, the streets are quieter. Most people are lying down, wrapped in whatever they have. The first attempts at sleep begin. The body is not yet deeply cold. There may be an hour, sometimes 2, where something close to rest is possible, but it will not last. The deep night is coming, and the deep night is different. Midnight passes. The city changes. Traffic thins. Voices fade. The sounds that filled the evening, conversations, footsteps, the rumble of buses, gradually disappear. What remains is wind, the hum of ventilation systems, the occasional siren in the distance, and cold that deepens with each hour. This is the most dangerous period of the night. Between midnight and 4 in the morning, the body enters its lowest metabolic phase. Core temperature naturally drops during these hours. In warm conditions, this poses no problem. In freezing temperatures, on concrete or frozen ground, this biological rhythm becomes a threat. The person wrapped in their layers and cardboard begins to feel it around 1 o'clock. Not sudden cold, a gradual chill that seeps inward despite the insulation. The warmth that built up in the first hours of night slowly leaks away. The body is producing less heat. The materials wrapped around them can only slow heat loss, not generate new warmth. Sleep becomes impossible to sustain. The pattern repeats throughout the night. You fall into sleep, light sleep, never deep. After 30 minutes, maybe an hour, you wake. Not from noise or disturbance, from cold. The body's warning system pulls you back to consciousness. Your feet are numb. Your fingers ache. The shivers start. Shivering is the body's furnace. Muscles contract rapidly, generating heat through friction. It's an effective system. It can raise heat production several times above resting levels. But shivering has costs. It burns calories you may not have. It prevents rest. And it only works if you have enough insulation to trap the heat being generated. So you lie there, shivering, waiting for warmth to build again. Sometimes it does. The shivers slow. Feeling returns to fingers and toes. The cocoon of layers holds just enough heat. You drift back toward sleep. Sometimes it doesn't work. The cold continues creeping inward. The shivers intensify rather than fade. You realize you need to move. Movement means breaking the insulated environment you've spent hours creating. You unwrap yourself, unroll the sleeping bag or layers of blankets and cardboard. Stand up. The air hits immediately, colder than you remembered. Everything you were wearing is now insufficient without that carefully constructed barrier around you. You walk in place, swing your arms, do jumping jacks if your body allows it. The goal is to generate heat, get blood flowing to extremities, bring your core temperature back up to a safe range. This takes energy, physical energy from muscles, caloric energy from food you may not have eaten, mental energy to make yourself move when exhaustion pulls you towards stillness. After 10 minutes, maybe 15, you feel warmer. Hands and feet regain sensation. The shivering stops. Now you face a choice. Return to your sleeping spot and rebuild the insulation system. Or keep moving. Keep generating heat through activity until sunrise brings some relief or warming locations open. Most nights, you return to the spot. You rebuild the layers. You tuck everything back around your body, trap new air pockets, wait for warmth to accumulate again. You sleep for another hour, then wake again from cold. The cycle repeats, 4 times a night, 5 times, more on the coldest nights. Each time, you lose a little more body heat. Each time, it takes longer to warm up. Each time, sleep becomes lighter and less restorative. This is why deep sleep never comes. Your body cannot enter the stages of sleep that provide true rest. You hover in light sleep, easily disrupted. The hypothalamus, the brain's temperature control center, keeps pulling you back to consciousness whenever core temperature drops too low. It's a survival mechanism. It keeps you alive. But it prevents the kind of sleep that restores the body and mind. By 3 in the morning, exhaustion becomes its own challenge. You're tired in a way that goes beyond normal sleepiness. The constant cycle of cold, waking, warming, and attempted sleep drains you. Your body wants rest. Your situation won't allow it. Some people give up on sleep entirely during the coldest months. They walk through the night, keep moving until dawn. It's exhausting in a different way, but at least it's predictable. Movement generates heat. Stillness brings cold. The equation is simple. Others find locations where they can stay semi-active while still having some protection. A covered bus stop where you can sit and stand repeatedly. An alcove where you can pace. A loading dock where you can move without being fully exposed to wind. These compromises don't provide rest, but they get you through the night. Around 3:30 or 4, the coldest hour approaches. This isn't psychological. It's physics. The ground and air have been radiating heat all night. The Earth's surface reaches its lowest temperature just before sunrise. If you're sleeping on concrete or ground, you're lying on the coldest surface of the night. The air temperature may have dropped several more degrees since midnight. Wind often picks up in pre-dawn hours. The combination creates the most dangerous conditions of the entire night. This is when hypothermia claims lives. Not in the early evening when the cold is fresh and the body still has energy. In the deep night and pre-dawn hours, when core temperature has been slowly dropping for 6 or 7 hours, when caloric reserves are depleted, when exhaustion overwhelms the instinct to move. People who survive winter on the streets know this danger. They know 4 in the morning is the threshold. If they can stay warm enough through these hours, they'll make it to dawn. If not, if the cold has penetrated too deeply, if they can't generate enough heat, if exhaustion has become too complete, this is when the body begins to fail. So they set internal alarms. They force themselves to wake at 4, to check their body, to move if necessary, to fight through 1 more hour until the city begins to wake. 4:15 in the morning. The night has reached its coldest point. You've been lying in your spot for 7 hours. The cardboard beneath you has compressed from your weight. What began as thick insulation has flattened. The ground's cold now presses closer to your body. Your layers have shifted during the night. Small gaps have opened. Cold air has found its way into spaces that were sealed at midnight. And you're tired in a way that makes everything harder. Your body wants to stay still, conserve energy, keep whatever warmth remains trapped in your cocoon. But you can feel the cold reaching deeper. Your feet have gone beyond cold to numb. Your fingers won't straighten fully. The shivers won't stop this time. You know you need to move. This is the calculation made every morning in the hour before dawn. Do you stay in your sleeping setup and try to hold out until sunrise? Or do you abandon it now, start moving, and face the cold actively rather than passively? The decision depends on many factors. How cold you are right now, how much energy you have, whether you have a destination in mind, a place you know will be open, warm, and accepting of your presence, whether your sleeping spot is visible enough that you need to pack up before people arrive for work, and whether you believe you can get warmer by staying still. If you choose to stay, you curl tighter, pull layers closer, try to seal every gap. You focus on the gradual lightening of the sky, counting minutes until sunrise brings psychological relief, even if the temperature hasn't changed. If you choose to move, you begin the process of extracting yourself from your spot. This is harder than it sounds. Your body has been stationary for hours. Muscles are stiff from cold. Joints ache. Your hands don't work well. Fingers are clumsy, slow to respond. The fine motor control needed to unzip a sleeping bag or untie a rope holding a tarp becomes difficult. You move slowly, not from caution, but from physical limitation. You sit up first. The cold hits your torso immediately. The warmth that existed inside your layers escapes. You stand, and your legs protest. Feet that were numb suddenly hurt as circulation returns. Everything you've wrapped around yourself needs to be gathered. The sleeping bag, if you have one. The blankets, the cardboard sheets, the plastic tarp, the extra clothes you used as padding. These materials are your survival tools. You can't leave them. Even if they're damp or frozen stiff, you need them for tonight. So you fold them as best you can with hands that barely work. You stuff them into bags or tie them into bundles. You put on whatever layers you'd removed for sleeping. You transform from a person attempting rest into a person carrying their entire life. This takes time. 15 minutes. 20. Longer if you're very cold or if the materials have frozen together. By the time you're ready to move, it might be 4:30, maybe 4:45. The city is still dark, still empty, but change is coming. You start walking, not toward anywhere specific at first, just walking to generate heat, to get blood moving, to fight the stiffness and cold that settled deep during the night. After 5 minutes, 10 minutes, your body begins to respond. Warmth builds, muscles loosen, the shivering eases. You begin to think more clearly about where to go. Options are limited at this hour, but they exist. Some 24-hour restaurants are genuinely welcoming. They understand that people need warm places in cold weather. You can sit with coffee for an hour or more. Use the bathroom. Warm yourself by degrees. Hospital emergency rooms maintain heat and light through the night. Some tolerate people sitting in waiting areas as long as they're not disruptive. Security might ask you to leave eventually, but you might get an hour first. Transit stations in some cities provide shelter. Subway entrances, bus terminals, places where heat rises from underground, or where climate control runs continuously. The goal is to reach one of these locations by 5 or 5:30, to be inside and warming yourself as dawn arrives, to recover enough body heat and function that you can face the day. But reaching these places requires walking while carrying everything you own, in the coldest part of the night, with a body that has been fighting cold for hours. Some mornings, the distance feels impossible. Your sleeping spot might be miles from the nearest welcoming location. Your body might be too tired, too cold, too depleted to walk that far. You might know from experience that by the time you arrive, security will have changed shifts and the new guard will ask you to leave immediately. So you make different choices. You find a spot that will catch early morning sun, an east-facing wall, a place where the first light will bring some warmth. You wait there, keep moving in place, do small exercises, endure until the sun rises, or you begin walking your route. The path through the city you'll walk anyway during the day. You started early. Keep moving. Stay ahead of the cold by refusing to be still. By 5:30, the sky begins to lighten. Not sunrise yet. That's still 30 minutes away, maybe more depending on season. But the absolute darkness lifts. The city starts to wake. Delivery trucks appear. Workers arrive at bakeries and coffee shops. Lights come on in buildings. The first buses start their routes. This is the threshold. The night survival phase ends. The day's navigation phase begins. You're exhausted. You haven't truly slept. Your body is depleted from hours of cold stress. But you've survived. You've made it through another night. By 6 or 6:30, places begin to open. Coffee shops, fast food restaurants. library branches in some cities, places with heat, bathrooms, the possibility of sitting down. You head toward whichever one you've chosen. You join the early morning geography of homeless individuals, people moving toward warmth, toward resources, toward the locations that will accept their presence for a few hours. You find a seat. The heat surrounds you. Your body begins to thaw. The tension that kept you alert all night slowly releases. And then, sometimes, the exhaustion hits fully. You sit in a booth or a chair. Warmth seeps into you. And your body, finally safe, finally warm enough, demands the sleep you couldn't get through the night. You fight it. Most places won't let you sleep. If you're visibly sleeping, you'll be asked to leave. But your eyes grow heavy. Your head nods forward. You drift despite yourself. Maybe you get 20 minutes before someone wakes you. Maybe less. It's not enough. It's never enough. But it's something. This is what the night has been. A series of insufficient solutions. Not enough warmth. Not enough sleep. Not enough safety. Just enough of each to survive until morning. And tomorrow night, you'll do it again. Cold doesn't just threaten the body. It steals rest. Sleep requires safety. It requires stillness. It requires the body's core temperature to drop slightly as metabolic processes slow. None of these conditions exist on a freezing street. The mind stays alert. It has to. Every sound might signal danger. Every shift in wind brings a fresh wave of cold that demands response. The body never fully releases into rest. Sleep comes in fragments. 20 minutes, 15, sometimes just a few minutes before the cold penetrates deep enough to trigger waking. The person shifts position, adjusts layers, tucks hands deeper into armpits, waits for minimal warmth to return, tries again. This isn't insomnia, it's survival override. The body prioritizes staying alive over staying asleep. When core temperature begins dropping, the brain forces consciousness. The person must move, must generate heat, must wake. Deep sleep becomes impossible. REM cycles never complete. The restorative phases of sleep, when the body repairs tissue and the brain consolidates memory, simply don't occur. One night of fragmented sleep causes irritability and slower thinking. A week causes impaired judgment. A month brings serious cognitive decline. An entire winter transforms mental function. Decision-making deteriorates. Risks that would normally seem obvious become harder to assess. The cold spot that's slightly more sheltered, but far more dangerous, starts looking acceptable. The stranger offering help might be genuine or might be predatory, but exhaustion makes the distinction harder to parse. Physical coordination suffers. Fine motor control declines. Even simple tasks, fastening buttons, opening containers, organizing belongings, become frustratingly difficult. The immune system weakens. Sleep deprivation suppresses immune function, even in warm conditions. Combined with cold exposure and the constant stress of survival, the body becomes vulnerable to every circulating illness. Memory fails. Not just long-term recall, but working memory, the ability to hold information while using it, remembering which services are available which days, tracking time, following multi-step instructions from outreach workers. All of it becomes harder. Emotional regulation collapses. The buffer between feeling and reaction thins. Frustration becomes anger faster. Disappointment becomes despair. The psychological resources needed to maintain hope and keep trying erode with each sleepless night. This compounds over time. Recovery from one bad night requires good sleep the next night. But the next night brings the same cold, the same fragmentation, the same survival override preventing rest. After weeks, the deficit becomes profound. Some people describe a floating sensation, a disconnection from their own thoughts. Others report visual distortions, shadows that move, shapes that aren't quite right. The brain, desperate for the dreaming it's been denied, begins generating dreamlike experiences while awake. Microsleeps occur. The person nods off for a few seconds while sitting, while walking. These involuntary lapses are dangerous. Someone crossing a street might step into traffic. Someone near water might stumble. The body simply takes the rest it needs, regardless of circumstances. The line between day and night blurs. Without the anchor of regular sleep, circadian rhythms destabilize. The person might feel exhausted at noon and restless at midnight, out of sync with the world's schedule and the services that operate on it. This makes everything else harder. Finding resources requires organization and planning. Maintaining hygiene requires effort and attention. Accessing services means navigating bureaucracy and remembering appointments. All of this becomes exponentially more difficult when operating on months of broken sleep. The exhaustion isn't visible the way a wound is visible. Someone can look functional while barely holding thoughts together. They might seem irritable or confused when they're actually displaying the symptoms of severe sleep deprivation. Some find brief respite during daylight hours, a library chair, a warming center. 20 minutes of sitting in warmth can allow the nervous system to finally release slightly. The person might fall immediately into deep sleep, then wake disoriented, unsure how long they were out. But these fragments don't add up to real rest. Sleep architecture requires sustained periods. Dropping immediately into deep sleep, then jerking awake 20 minutes later, then repeating the cycle, doesn't restore what extended cold nights destroy. The body needs roughly 7 to 9 hours of continuous sleep to complete multiple full cycles. Homeless individuals in winter might accumulate 4 hours across a night, none of it sustained, much of it so light that it barely counts as rest. Over months, this becomes the baseline. The person forgets what real rest feels like. Exhaustion becomes the default state. They function, but they function impaired. And still they survive. They wake each morning. They move through another day. They prepare for another night. The resilience required is extraordinary. To continue making decisions, solving problems, and maintaining dignity while operating on a fraction of the sleep a human needs reveals a strength most people will never have to access. But resilience has costs. It depletes reserves that cannot be infinitely drawn upon. Each winter takes something that may not fully return. Cities respond to winter. The response is never enough. Most urban areas operate emergency cold weather shelters. These activate when temperatures drop below a specific threshold. The number varies. Some cities open shelters at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Others wait until 20 degrees. A few operate shelters all winter regardless of temperature. The threshold matters. On a night that reaches 25 degrees, people suffer. They just don't yet have access to the beds waiting for a 20-degree trigger. Shelters take many forms. Some occupy church basements. Others use community centers or school gymnasiums. A few cities operate dedicated facilities designed specifically for emergency housing. The space fills with cots. Rows of them, sometimes just feet apart. Each represents warmth, safety from the elements, a night without the constant cycle of waking from cold. But capacity is finite. A shelter might hold 50 people, 100. On the coldest nights, when demand peaks, many more arrive than beds exist. First come, first served determines access. Lines form in the afternoon. People arrive early, sometimes hours before opening, and wait. In the cold. To escape the cold. The irony is not lost on anyone. Some shelters use lottery systems. Others employ check-in procedures that prioritize the most vulnerable: elderly individuals, families with children, people with documented medical conditions. These systems intend fairness. They also mean many people who need shelter are turned away. The doors open. People enter carrying everything they own: bags, backpacks, bedrolls, carts when allowed. Personal possessions are checked. Some shelters provide lockers. Others require surrendering items to staff. Others still simply have no secure storage, meaning belongings stay with their owners or risk disappearing. Rules are extensive: no weapons, no drugs, no alcohol. Anyone visibly intoxicated may be refused entry. This policy protects shelter populations from volatile situations. It also excludes people whose addiction is precisely what placed them on the street. Sobriety requirements eliminate a significant portion of the homeless population from shelter access. Someone who drinks to manage withdrawal symptoms, to numb psychological pain, or simply because addiction has taken hold cannot enter. They return to the street. Behavioral rules are strict. No fighting, no threats. Quiet after a certain hour. Compliance with staff instructions. One violation might result in removal. Repeat violations can bring bans lasting days or weeks. The shelter environment itself creates challenges. 50 people sleeping in one room means noise, coughing, snoring, movement. For someone whose nervous system is already hyper-alert from street survival, the stimulus can prevent rest. Illness spreads easily. Respiratory infections circulate through crowded spaces. Colds become bronchitis. Flu becomes pneumonia. The shelter offers warmth but concentrates contagion. Theft occurs. Despite rules and supervision, personal items disappear: shoes, jackets, small amounts of cash. People sleep with their possessions or wake periodically to check them. The shelter provides warmth. It provides a mattress or cot. It often provides a meal. These are not small things. On the coldest nights, they are survival itself. But morning comes. Everyone leaves. Shelters empty at a designated time, often early, sometimes by 6 or 7 in the morning. The person returns to the street for the entire day. This cycle repeats. Night after night, the shelter becomes a holding pattern. It prevents death from exposure. It does not provide stability, privacy, or the foundation needed to address the deeper problems that created homelessness. Some people choose not to use shelters even when space exists. The reasons vary. Previous bad experiences: theft, assault, humiliation. Rules that feel dehumanizing. Separation from partners or pets. The loss of autonomy that comes from submitting to institutional structure. Others simply miss the window. The line formed too early. The beds filled too fast. The person arrived 10 minutes too late and found doors already closed. Overflow systems exist in some cities. When primary shelters fill, secondary locations activate. Warming centers, temporary spaces, places that offer warmth and a chair but not a bed. Something. Not enough, but something. Transportation to shelters creates barriers. A shelter across the city helps only if the person can reach it. Bus fare, walking distance in dangerous cold. Timing that requires leaving a known area for an unfamiliar location. Outreach teams work the coldest nights. They drive marked vans through areas where homeless people gather. They offer rides to shelters, information about open beds, sometimes just hot coffee and blankets for those who refuse to come. These teams often include formerly homeless individuals, people who understand the calculation, who know why someone might refuse what looks from the outside like obvious help. Trust is not automatic. Someone living on the street has often experienced broken promises from institutions. The outreach worker offering help represents a system that may have failed them repeatedly. Some outreach teams have worked the same areas for years. They know individuals by name. They understand specific needs. This person won't go to shelters where dogs aren't allowed. That person needs a facility with wheelchair access. Relationships build slowly. On the coldest nights, outreach teams do welfare checks. They visit known encampments. They look for individuals who are elderly, ill, or particularly vulnerable. They assess whether someone is alert and responsive or showing signs of hypothermia. Sometimes they find people who have died. Despite shelters, despite services, despite everyone's best efforts, the emergency shelter system saves lives. Absolutely and without question. On extremely cold nights, available beds mean people who would have frozen to death instead survive. But the system is overwhelmed. It was designed for emergencies, a few nights of extreme cold each winter. In many cities, it now operates at capacity for weeks or months at a time. The gap between need and resources grows wider each year. More people experiencing homelessness, shelter capacity remaining flat or even declining as funding falters and facilities close. What exists is remarkable given resource constraints. What's needed is something else entirely. The city operates 14 emergency shelters during winter months. On the coldest nights, they fill within an hour of opening. 200 beds total. 300 people seeking them. The math never works. Cold weather protocols activate when temperatures drop below freezing. Some facilities open at 32 degrees. Others wait for 20. The threshold determines who gets inside and who remains out. Lines form before doors open. People arrive hours early. They wait in the cold to escape the cold. First come, first served. Inside, a gymnasium floor covered with cots. Rows of temporary beds separated by 2 feet. Metal frames. Thin mattresses, wool blankets issued at check-in, fluorescent lights that stay on through the night, the constant sound of people coughing, shifting, snoring in a space designed for basketball games, now holding 80 people trying to sleep. The warmth is real. The shelter is genuine. For many, it means survival, but the trade-offs are real too. Check-in requires identification at some facilities. Others mandate sobriety checks. Breathalyzers at the door. A blood alcohol reading above the threshold means exclusion, means returning to the street regardless of temperature. The policy exists for safety reasons. The consequence falls on those who need shelter most. Families face separation. Many shelters divide by gender. Mothers sent to women's facilities, fathers to men's, couples split apart. The choice becomes staying together in the cold or accepting warmth in separate buildings across the city. Personal belongings create complications. Bag limits exist. 1 backpack, 1 small item. Everything else stays outside. Carts cannot enter. Possessions accumulated over months. The survival gear, the extra layers, the small valuables that represent everything owned, must be hidden somewhere or lost. Theft happens inside. Crowded spaces, strangers in close quarters. Shoes disappear, phones vanish. The jacket used as a pillow goes missing while someone uses the bathroom. No locks, no private space. Constant vigilance even in shelter. Illness spreads quickly. 80 people in one room. Close quarters, shared air, cold and flu season overlapping with winter shelter season. One person's cough becomes 10 people's cough becomes 30. Respiratory infections cycling through the population. Stomach viruses passing from cot to cot. Bedbugs travel. Between shelters. Between people. They hide in seams of clothing and backpacks. They spread through facilities despite cleaning efforts. The bites appear days later. The infestation follows someone back to their street location. Rules govern every aspect. Wake-up times, mandatory exit hours, no re-entry during day, breakfast served at 6. Everyone out by 7, regardless of whether they slept. The doors lock, the building closes. Return only when evening intake reopens. Some people cannot tolerate the environment. Trauma makes enclosed spaces unbearable. Anxiety builds in crowded rooms. Panic attacks emerge. The nervous system, already strained by homelessness, cannot process the sensory overload of shelter life. Mental illness complicates shelter use. Paranoia in group settings. Voices that become overwhelming when surrounded by people. The structured environment itself triggering symptoms. Staff often lack training for mental health crises. The response to disturbance often means removal, means ban, means exclusion from future shelter. Pets present an unsolvable problem. Most shelters refuse animals. The service dog exception exists, but most companions don't qualify. A person camping with a dog faces the choice: surrender the animal or stay outside. Many choose outside. The dog provides security, companionship, purpose. The bond outweighs the warmth. Couples without legal marriage face separation policies. Years together don't matter. The relationship unrecognized. The choice between together in danger or apart in safety. Many choose together. Previous shelter experiences shape decisions. A single traumatic incident, assault, theft, humiliation, creates lasting avoidance. The memory of one bad night outweighs the promise of warmth. Trust, once broken, does not easily return. Autonomy disappears in shelter. The schedule dictated, the space assigned, the rules non-negotiable. For people who have lost nearly everything, control over one's own movement and choices becomes precious. Shelter requires surrendering that last piece of self-determination. When morning comes, when shelter's empty, the search for warmth continues. The day offers different resources, different spaces, different rules. The public library opens at 9, the main branch downtown. 3 stories, heated to 68 degrees, free entry, no questions asked. People arrive when doors unlock. They head to reading rooms, to study carols, to chairs positioned near heating vents. They carry books from shelves. They sit. They rest. The library provides more than warmth. Bathrooms with running water, sinks for washing, paper towels, soap, the opportunity to clean hands and face, to use a private stall, to have a moment of dignity in a space designed for public access. Water fountains offer hydration, free, clean, available throughout the day. Dehydration happens easily in winter. The cold masks thirst. The body still needs water. The library provides it. Tables offer space to organize belongings, to sort through backpacks, to dry damp clothing, to simply spread out for a moment without carrying everything. The small restoration that comes from setting a burden down. Outlets allow phone charging. The phone serves as lifeline, connection to services, communication with caseworkers, access to information about shelter beds and meal programs. The battery percentage becomes crucial. The library's electrical system becomes infrastructure for survival. Staff policies vary by location. Some libraries welcome homeless patrons openly. Others enforce strict rules. No sleeping, no strong odors, no bags larger than a certain size. The balance between public service and public complaint. The decision of which public matters more. Security guards monitor. They walk floors. They check on people who appear to be sleeping. A head resting on arms earns a warning. Repeat violations bring removal. The library offers warmth, but not rest. The distinction carefully maintained. Community warming centers operate on the coldest days. Church basements, community centers. Temporary spaces opened during temperature emergencies. They allow what libraries don't: lying down, actual sleep, extended rest without harassment. Drop-in centers run by outreach organizations provide all-day access: coffee, snacks, lockers for storage, showers in some locations, laundry facilities, case managers available for conversation, medical staff offering basic care. These centers understand their population. Rules exist, but enforcement focuses on safety rather than control. A person can sleep in a chair without being woken every 20 minutes. Someone can stay all day without justifying their presence. Fast food restaurants become warming stations. A small purchase, coffee, a $1 menu item, buys hours inside. Refills on soda, access to bathroom, a booth near the window. Some managers tolerate long stays. Others enforce strict loitering policies. The difference between compassion and commerce. Shopping malls offer warmth through retail hours. Walking the corridors, sitting in food courts, using restrooms. The constant movement to avoid security attention. The performance of shopping without money. The exhausting effort to belong in a space designed for consumption. Transit stations provide heated waiting areas, subway platforms, bus terminals, 24-hour access in some cities, benches designed to prevent sleeping, armrests dividing seats, angled surfaces, periodic bars, hostile architecture that acknowledges presence while discouraging rest. Hospital emergency rooms serve as last resort warming spaces. The wait to be seen can last hours. The heated waiting room provides respite. Some people report minor symptoms, knowing treatment isn't the goal. Others sit and hope no one asks why they're there. The ethical complexity of using emergency resources for warmth. These daytime spaces form a circuit, a rotation of locations allowing a person to stay warm through daylight hours. Library until early afternoon, coffee shop for 2 hours, mall until closing, drop-in center when it opens. The constant movement between resources, the mental map of available warmth, the timing memorized, the backup plans for when one location becomes unavailable. The day's warmth allows recovery from the night's cold. Core temperature rises, extremities thaw, the shivering stops. Sleep-deprived people catch fragments of rest in chairs and corners. The body repairs what it can before facing another night. But daylight warming doesn't replace nighttime shelter. The cycle continues. As afternoon turns to evening, as facilities close, as temperatures drop again, the search begins once more. The temporary reprieve ends. The survival challenge resumes. The van moves slowly through empty streets. It's 2 a.m. The temperature has dropped to 15 degrees. Inside, outreach workers carry blankets, thermoses of hot coffee, chemical hand warmers, lists of names, and last known locations. They're not looking for addresses. They're looking for people. Under the bridge where someone usually sleeps, behind the dumpster near the closed restaurant, in the doorway that provides a windbreak. They've made this route before. Many times. They know the faces, the patterns, who accepts help, who doesn't. This isn't a one-time rescue. It's a relationship built over months, sometimes years. The first contact is rarely successful. Someone who has learned not to trust institutions doesn't suddenly change because a stranger in a van offers a blanket. But the workers return. Same route, same nights, same quiet offer. Eventually, many people accept the blanket, then the coffee, then the conversation about shelter beds. Trust accumulates slowly. On the coldest nights, that trust becomes life-saving. The person who wouldn't accept help in November might agree to go to a warming center in January when the temperature becomes genuinely deadly. The outreach workers carry more than supplies. They carry information. Which shelters have open beds? Where the warming centers operate? What services don't require identification? They know the barriers each person faces. The outstanding warrant that makes someone afraid of shelters. The mental health crisis that makes enclosed spaces unbearable. The couple who won't separate. Sometimes they can solve these problems. Sometimes they can't, but they remember and they return. The group gathers in the usual spot as darkness falls. 7 people, different ages, different circumstances, all facing the same night. They share what they know. The library on 5th will be open until 9. The church on Broad is serving hot meals at 6. The police cleared people from under the highway overpass, so that spot isn't safe tonight. This information flows constantly. A survival network with no formal structure. The experienced teach the newly homeless where to find the warmest grates, which business owners will tolerate someone sleeping in their doorway, how to layer newspapers for insulation, how to survive. Someone produces an extra blanket. Someone else has spare socks. The resources get distributed based on need, not ownership. There's a hierarchy of knowledge. Those who have survived multiple winters carry wisdom that newcomers desperately need. Which spots flood when it rains? Where the wind cuts through no matter how protected it looks? What time the shelters open their lines? The learning curve is steep. Mistakes in winter can be fatal, so the information sharing continues, generous and practical. At night, some groups develop watch systems, taking turns staying awake, providing security through collective vigilance. One person watches while others attempt sleep. Then they rotate. It means no one gets full rest. But it also means everyone survives until morning. This informal structure exists parallel to official services, sometimes connecting with them, sometimes operating independently. The network can't replace shelter, can't solve homelessness, can't make winter safe, but it distributes resources, shares knowledge, provides community in a situation designed to isolate. The human body can endure remarkable cold, but endurance is not the same as immunity. Every night spent in freezing conditions extracts a price. The costs accumulate quietly. They compound over weeks and months. Some damage becomes visible quickly. Other harm remains hidden until it becomes permanent. Frostbite strikes the extremities first, fingers and toes, ears and nose. The body sacrifices these outer regions to protect the core. Blood flow constricts, tissue freezes. In mild cases, skin reddens and swells. In severe cases, tissue dies. The damage may not be immediately apparent. A person might not realize until numbness gives way to pain. By then, the injury is done. Treatment requires rewarming. But rewarming without proper care causes additional damage. Ice crystals that formed in tissue tear cells as they melt. The process is excruciating. On the street, there is no gradual, controlled rewarming. There is only the shift from frozen to thawed as morning comes or a warm location opens. This cycle, freezing at night, thawing by day, creates the worst possible conditions for tissue recovery. Trench foot develops differently. It requires sustained cold and moisture. Wet socks inside wet shoes, feet that never fully dry. The condition earned its name in World War I, when soldiers stood in flooded trenches for days. On winter streets, the mechanism is identical. Snow melts into shoes. Socks become damp from sweat. There is nowhere to dry them properly. The cold is rarely below freezing, but it doesn't need to be. Prolonged exposure to temperatures just above freezing combined with moisture, is enough. The feet swell, skin becomes pale, then mottled. Blisters form. In advanced cases, tissue begins to break down. Walking becomes painful, then impossible. But a person experiencing homelessness cannot simply stay off their feet. They must move to stay warm. They must walk to reach services. The condition worsens with every step. Respiratory illness follows a predictable pattern. The body's defense against infection requires energy and warmth. When all available energy goes to maintaining core temperature, the immune system operates at a deficit. A cold becomes bronchitis. Bronchitis becomes pneumonia. What would be a minor illness in other circumstances becomes severe. Chronic conditions deteriorate without stable shelter. Diabetes requires consistent food intake, medication schedules, and the ability to monitor blood sugar. None of these are reliably possible on the street. Heart disease worsens when the body must constantly work to stay warm. Asthma flares in cold air. Medications require refrigeration or protection from freezing, or simply a place to store them safely. The street provides none of this. The immune system itself becomes compromised. Stress hormones remain elevated. Sleep never reaches the deep stages necessary for cellular repair. Nutrition is inconsistent. The body exists in a state of permanent emergency response. Every subsequent illness hits harder and lasts longer. The mind keeps its own accounting. Fear accumulates differently than cold. It builds in layers that do not melt with morning sun. Hypervigilance becomes a permanent state. Every sound requires assessment. Every approaching person presents potential threat. This alertness serves a purpose. It keeps people alive. But vigilance without rest destroys the nervous system's ability to regulate itself. The body cannot distinguish between true threat and false alarm when both trigger the same response a dozen times each night. Sleep deprivation compounds this state. Not just tiredness, but the deep cognitive impairment that comes from weeks without restorative rest. Judgment falters. Decision-making becomes difficult. The executive functions that allow planning and problem-solving deteriorate. This makes escaping homelessness even harder. Navigating bureaucracy, attending appointments, completing paperwork, all require mental resources that chronic sleep deprivation depletes. The repetition itself inflicts damage. The same struggle, night after night, with no evidence that it will ever change. Hope requires the ability to imagine a different future. When every night brings the same cold, the same discomfort, the same fight to survive until morning, that imagination dims. There is also the particular trauma of visibility without recognition. To be seen by hundreds of people daily, yet looked through as if transparent. To occupy public space while being treated as an obstruction. The message becomes internalized, that one's presence is a problem, one's humanity negotiable. Privacy disappears. Basic bodily functions become public. Illness must be endured in full view. There is nowhere to cry without audience, nowhere to tend to hygiene with dignity. This erosion of the private self, the part of human experience that belongs to the individual alone, constitutes its own form of violence. The cold makes this worse. It drives people into doorways, into public buildings, into any warm space. But these spaces come with rules about who belongs and who doesn't. Security guards enforce invisible boundaries. The warmth itself becomes conditional on performing acceptability, on being quiet, still, and as invisible as possible despite occupying visible space. Winter also makes invisible the person within the layers. Faces disappear into hoods. Bodies become shapeless bundles. Passers-by can avoid eye contact more easily. The weather provides justification to hurry past, to not stop, to not see. The cold that forces people to seek help simultaneously makes them easier to ignore. Some survive these winters. They endure what seems unendurable. But survival is not triumph. It is simply continuation. The cost is carried forward into whatever comes next. The morning comes, not easily, not comfortably, but it comes. Another night survived. Another dawn reached through cold and vigilance and the extraordinary effort of simply staying alive. This is resilience, not the inspirational kind, the exhausting kind, the kind that takes everything someone has, night after night, leaving little energy for anything else. These survival strategies represent human ingenuity under impossible conditions, but they shouldn't be necessary. Winter homelessness isn't a failure of individuals. It's a failure of systems, of housing policy, of resource allocation, of the choices we make as communities about who deserves warmth and safety. The knowledge required to survive freezing nights could be channeled elsewhere, toward employment, stability, recovery, if the basic need for shelter were met first. There are pathways out. Housing first approaches work. Sustained support works. Appropriate resources work. The same strength that gets someone through a frozen night can become the foundation for rebuilding a life, when given the chance. Until then, the cycle continues. Sunset brings preparation. Deep night brings endurance. Dawn brings brief relief. And the next night requires it all again. These are our neighbors, our community members, people navigating an existence most of us cannot imagine. Their survival matters. Their dignity matters. Their lives matter beyond their ability to endure the cold. Rest now, if you can.